All right, so I have officially completed the Metal Gear Solid franchise. If you've been following the channel for a little bit of time, you'll know that about 2 months ago, I completed playing Metal Gear Solid 1 through 3, and then I played Metal Gear Solid Delta on my ultimate journey of beating the entire Metal Gear Solid franchise. There are some caveats to this, of course. I did not go back and play the Metal Gear 1 and 2 MSX games. I haven't played Portable Ops, and I haven't touched like Ghost Babel. There's a few side things that I think probably are really good games, Metal Gear Acid as well, that I didn't take the time to go out and do since, it's already such a large number of games and a lot of really great moments to experience. So I think I completed the mainline ones with kind of the most relevant information, but maybe in the future I'll go back and check out some of these side experiences that also seem to have a lot of really great gameplay that people talk about very lovingly. But today I'm only going to be talking about Metal Gear Solid 4, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, and Metal Gear Solid 5. And I'll include Ground Zeroes in that as I did play through that as well. And overall, I love the Metal Gear Solid series now. I think like anybody who has experienced Kojima's masterpiece and all the insanity that comes with it, there are an incredible number of just amazing moments and great, plot points and amazing gameplay mechanics that were revolutionary for the time and refined throughout the series. And it is incredibly enjoyable, and I recommend everybody at least checks it out. Really specifically, Metal Gear Solid 1 through 3, I think, are foundational in a lot of ways of understanding where gaming came from and where it could be going, and kind of how visionary Hideo Kojima was in this space. So I like the series, good games, with some, like, maybe, I don't know, caveats to that as we get into the later entries. But I'm going to start here talking about it with Metal Gear Solid 4. So, the Guns of the Patriots, despite not being the last Metal Gear Solid game to release, or even the game farthest in the timeline, is what I believe to be the most proper conclusion that can be offered for Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3. I really hesitate to even say that the other stuff is super necessary to engage with, and really feels like it builds out some of the ideas in the world. But the main culminating narrative about how war impacts society and the people who engage in it is kind of on display in its highest form in Metal Gear Solid 4. We get to see all of the insane technological innovations that come from Foxdie and mechs, and the introduction of this cyberware into mercenaries and assassins. And it really paints this picture of an entire world that has grown so different from the kind of baseline world that felt much more akin to what we're experiencing in the earlier entries, despite obviously some of the insane tech that was available. And the gameplay felt like a culmination of the experience that he had started crafting in Metal Gear Solid 1. I had to make a whole video talking about Metal Gear Solid 4's battlefield stealth, because I was just so blown away with the first 3 chapters of this game and how you were able to approach combat in these actual war zones. And like I talked about in that video in more depth, so I'm not going to get too far into it here, but the idea that for the entire series leading up to this point, we're being told that we are a soldier and the experience of being on a battlefield is so relevant to us, and simultaneously being disconnected from that experience as we are a solo operative, doing very singular missions on a very small team level, to get the contrast of now seeing old Snake engaging in those environments was just overwhelmingly satisfying. And the way that it was implemented made the gameplay that, like I said, was very familiar from Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, and 3 feel new, in the sense that we're now engaging in that stealth in these different environments that we really hadn't seen before, especially on the scale that was provided. I also, like I said, talking about the conclusion of the story, this is the ending. This is the ending of Metal Gear Solid's, for my from my perspective. Not Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, none of the stuff that comes in Peace Walker 5 that kind of, wraps things around together in this cyclical way. I think that in terms of the mission statement that Kojima seemingly had about how terrifying mutually assured destruction is, and how the power structures of the world seek to control society and manipulate us into violence, this is the conclusive thesis statement on that line of thought. And he executes on it so perfectly. The culminating event, in this final chapter where we're getting to see Old Snake ragged and just this absolute hero, just moving forward despite all this adversity and the constant war around him and the impact it's having on your friends, and the constant battles that are around you affecting all the people you know and love. That is like the ultimate conclusion to war is bad, we should be chill, which is, I think, the conclusion that Old Snake comes to at the end of the game when he decides to go hang out with Hal and Sonny and just, be a nice, good father for the rest of his days after he gets a very forceful hug from his dad. There are aspects of the story, just like with every Metal Gear game, that are a little, like, too bad to say that maybe it was something that was lost in translation. The Naomi Roy Campbell stuff, this could be, I'm willing to say, it could be that I'm ignorant. It could be that there's some really great grand point to that storyline about how Naomi lied to Raiden to say that she was getting with Roy Campbell and said that she had a miscarriage, but actually she did have their kid, and that was the right thing to do because it protected their family. I just legitimately cannot decipher in my head, even using the context of the Metal Gear universe, why that was necessary at all. Surely the impact that would have on Raiden would be more of a net negative for the world than if she hadn't done that. And also, it's not like Naomi and Roy Campbell were working for the Patriots at that point. She had entirely separated herself. And I do think that the point of that reveal in the end of the game is supposed to be like, everyone hated Naomi because we were telling you she did this horrible thing and it was so bad, and the whole game we're like trying to make you feel this way, and then at the end it's like, she was actually looking out, for Raiden. But how does that help? I still don't understand. How does it help that she pretended to be with Roy? Was she really that protected? Surely the Patriots knew about Roy Campbell, and they would have known that he's not on their side. He's directly engaging with Old Snake for the entirety of the game. And the other reveal at the end of the game is that Drebin was working for the Patriots too. And in a way, we were working for the Patriots as well. So it's like, did that really protect Naomi in any real capacity? I guess the one thing you could say is that if Raiden really was kind of like an abusive drunk, and that's an accurate part of it, that maybe it protected her from him, but didn't it kind of seem like all of Raiden's problems maybe around that situation came from the fact that he was lied to and manipulated by Naomi for the entirety of Metal Gear Solid 2 and the relationship they had prior to that, and then for the entirety of Metal Gear Solid 4? I get also that he's a child soldier, and that probably is going to, or was a child soldier, and that's probably going to reverberate throughout the rest of his life and manifest in a way that is not very favorable in terms of how you engage with people that you love. But that's something that Naomi knew from the very beginning when she chose to fuck with his mind and be a spy who's in a relationship with him. I just cannot piece together exactly how that's beneficial, and it is frustrating because I do know that the reveal is supposed to be like a happy family all on, and that even gets more messed up in Metal Gear Rise and Revengeance, which we'll talk about in a minute. But there are certain elements of the story like that are just so far out in left field that I don't even understand. But the total concept, even the silliness of having real Big Boss show up in the end and, like I said, do that tactical hug to Old Snake, that is such a good bow on the entire series that some of the nonsensical parts of that I'm entirely willing to just let go of. But I think that's one of the things you have to accept as you go through and you learn about the whole series, is that not everything, fits together one for one. It's not this perfect puzzle piece. And I like that because reality is not a perfect puzzle where every little piece fits together and explains things perfectly. Like, there are misunderstandings, there are lies, there's confusion, and history is written by the victor, and that's on full display here. And overall, like I said, Metal Gear Solid 4, out of all the games I played, that was the best conclusion to the actual series and the ideas that I think were being presented. And just perfect themes for the end state of everything else that we saw. Okay, and the last thing I gotta talk about with Metal Gear Solid 4 is the emulation. It is an absolute travesty and completely mind-boggling to me that the only way to really experience this game properly is to buy a PS3. And hey, I did my best to get a PS3. Now, I can't justify to my wife going out and dropping like, I don't know what it'd be, like $180 to play Metal Gear Solid 4. But I got on the old Facebook Marketplace. I traded an old console. I got a PlayStation 3. And there was something wrong with it. Of course, because it's a, whatever, 20-year-old system at this point, there's going to be issues. All right, that's fine. Trade my way around, pick up one for cheap, know a friend, got my hands on another one. Also has an issue. Okay, that's okay. I work around it. I get it fixed. We got PS3 hen going. Shit's, a little, I'm in there. I'm in the code. I'm in the mainframe trying to figure out how to play this shit, right? Finally get Metal Gear Solid 4 loaded, and you can't, like, capture it. You can't use a capture card, so it's not like I can stream the game, which maybe that's a singular issue to me. But what I'm saying is there's so many barriers to entry to play this game that is what I feel the ultimate conclusion to Metal Gear, that you have to emulate it. And the emulation is janky. I have seen, people say that they can run it very well. I've tried what I believe to be all the possible RPCS3 settings to make this run like really well. I'm able to have a good experience. I was able to beat the game, obviously changing settings and messing with things and tuning as I go, but constant crashes, insane visual glitches. And it's not, I think, a consequence of the hardware I was running it on. I think the hardware I was running it on should be able to play it, but even on the RPCS3 wiki, it's not like perfectly playable. It's whatever the state right below that is, where like you can run it and you can probably get through it, but there's going to be some major issues. And the fact that they're holding on to this game to release it inside of Master Collection Volume 2, but we have no release date, and this game came out over 15 years ago or something, is just absolutely bonkers to me. I don't understand it from a financial level. I don't understand it from a moral level of like, you created this art, you have to fucking let people play the fucking art. Like, it's so unfair. I get it. They're a company, they're a private company, they do whatever they want, but very, very frustrating the way that I had to experience it. And going in and skipping the cutscene, saving, and then going back and watching a YouTube video to make sure I didn't crash during a cutscene and have to redo an entire boss fight again because, there's some error that I just couldn't account for. So that's what I'll say about that. I have to say it because Metal Gear Solid 4 is great, and it's impossible really to experience. I wouldn't even recommend that anybody play through it if they have to emulate it. If you can get your hands on a PS3 and, you can get it sorted out that way and you can play through it with that experience, I would recommend that, I think. But I wouldn't recommend that you go out and you drop, some ridiculous amount of money on buying an old console with really only, as far as I can tell, one game locked to it that's super worth playing. Now that Demon Souls is, has this crazy good remake on PlayStation 5. So it's hard. It's just a very hard spot in terms of recommending the game, but I do love the game. I think it was a great conclusion and thoroughly enjoyed it. I would say probably out of the 4 in this, back chunk of the series that I played, this is probably my second favorite. All right, the next game I played was Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance because I thought it would be a good change in pace, having just gone through Metal Gear Solid 1 through 4, which are all pretty consistent in the mechanics, and I thought it would be good to take a little breather from stealth action and do, I guess, just straight action. And I think that was a good choice. I was caught off guard in the very first level when a Metal Gear Ray pops up. It's like, oh my god, we're already fighting a Metal Gear Ray. And then by the way we murder it, I was caught even more off guard, literally cutting it in half. Obviously, Raiden's evolution in Metal Gear Solid 4, I think, is what really makes him such a beloved character. So now getting to experience that power fantasy is incredibly satisfying. It could be, for what I'm about to say, it could be I'm not that great at these types of games. Maybe I'm not great at, any type of game. But specifically these kind of like hack and slash action games, maybe I'm describing that poorly for people who are fans of this genre. Like I haven't played Bayonetta. My experience would really be original Devil May Cry 1 and 2 that I played when they came out. That's what I think is like I'm trying to remember any other like games I played that are really like this, and I think it's pretty exclusive to that. Would you count like Infamous maybe, or probably not, right? Like that seems a little bit different to me. The game is a lot of fun, and like I said, very different. There's a few things that I just cannot get over with this game that make me think of the whole experience in a less than like positive light. For one, the animation style. I don't think that it was bad probably when it released, but now because of Skibbity Toilet, and I have two very young children, I cannot watch these cutscenes without thinking about Skibbity Toilet, and it throws the whole thing off for me. I get that. I think it was done maybe in Source Engine, and I think that explains the uncanny, over-exaggerated faces that everyone is doing, but there is not like a single badass character here aside from Raiden, because they are all stretching their faces 1,000%, and it is just ridiculous to to observe. Um, that's just one of those things where it's like, might be a personal thing for me, but the visual presentation of the cutscenes is just so uncanny to me that I can't really get down with it, despite enjoying it kind of humorously. The other thing is the narrative. I kind of expected, just based off going through the series, I was playing on stream and people were talking about how fond they were of Metal Gear Rising Revengeance and Raiden's story, that they were going to deliver an experience that was additive to Raiden. And I really did not get this from that game. I kind of seen Raiden at the place where he's at in the hospital and, embracing his son in those final minutes of Metal Gear Solid 4. That makes me think that the direction that he's moving in is much different than what we see here. And I'm fine with the idea that he continues on this mercenary warrior soldier lifestyle. That makes sense. It's like it's hard to shed the sins of your past and move on. And for a soldier like him, okay. And he's keeping his family safe in New Zealand, whatever, while he does these jobs. But for the story arc of Raiden, and to see where he starts as a child soldier, to see where he ends with a child of his own, you would think that where you would want to go from a narrative perspective would be a place where that becomes the priority, the protection of his child to ensure that these things don't happen to him now that he has been through all of the trauma that could come from that and, changed as a person and found value in the right things. And with Snake as a mentor and friend, he's been guided on this path of moving on. The whole speech from the end of Metal Gear Solid 2 about finding value in your own experiences, Snake says to Raiden, really makes me feel like that was supposed to be the end of his arc. It was supposed to be him on the bed, and he moves on with his family. He lives a real life. He's not murdering people and cutting robots in half. He's, going forward and doing normal things that normal people do, or at least some semblance of that he can get with the fact that he's basically a cyborg now. So it was very unfortunate to see that the path they took him in was one where he was still grappling with a lot of these same issues. I get it from maybe like a realistic perspective. Like I said, those things are hard to shed, and I'm not saying that it instantly solves it. It just takes a lot of weight away from me from the end of the fourth game. Also, everything that they do with Sonny is very weird and off-putting to me, and the introduction of the other kid doesn't really make sense, and none of it is written very well. I genuinely, kind of like in my head canon, would say that this was just like this is just like a nightmare that Raiden has while he's like on the beach with his family or something, taking a nap about the state of the world, and he's worried about things. Maybe that's where like I would position it. Obviously, Armstrong, the senator you fight in the end, is fantastic and hilarious, and like some of the shit he says, you're like, okay, I kind of get where this guy's coming from, like with a lot of Metal Gear Solid bosses. But the caveat to that being like kind of one of the characters that are more interesting and do have something that's compelling to say is that I don't like the boss fight. I do feel like Metal Gear Solid as a whole kind of suffers from this thing that I'm not particularly fond of, where the final boss fight that you engage in introduces new mechanics at the very last minute, and it's not something that you build up to. It's not like when you go through a section in Dark Souls, you're fighting enemies that have abilities that are akin to what's going to be presented, in that, boss fight that you're leading up to. Uh, so that you're kind of like building to this idea of being able to execute against these attacks that are coming towards you. Metal Gear Solid does this thing where in the final boss fight, it feels like of every game, they introduce this new idea that is like not difficult, but just unexpected. It could be me. It could be me, smooth brain. I didn't see, this coming. I wasn't paying enough attention, but it's like just based off the fact that I would say, I don't want maybe not the majority, but a significant number of my deaths in all the Metal Gear Solid games happen on the final boss, which just kind of makes it feel unfair and kind of takes the wind out of my sails in this really climactic moment. I could be fighting a handful of things here. Metal Gear Rising Revengeance is another game that runs a little bit weird on PC, or ran a little bit weird for me. Like I couldn't go full screen for some reason because that would cause it to glitch out. There were a little bit of stutters. Maybe it's a thing like that, and now you're kind of in this big culminating moment. There's a lot going on screen. But I really feel like that's something that all the Metal Gear games suffer from, and this one suffers from it too. And while the Armstrong boss fight is very fun, the mechanics just kind of came out of left field for me and weren't something that I was truly prepared for, especially when I really didn't die a whole lot to all the other bosses. And it kind of just made that last fight something that by the time I got through, I was like, all right, I just want to finish it. Once again, could be a thing. I'm not like super familiar with the franchise, or sorry, not the franchise, this style of gameplay. Like I said, having only played Devil May Cry maybe a long fucking time ago. But I think overall, that is a problem that the Metal Gear Solid series has for me. And this is kind of on a bit of more of a display here in Rising Revengeance. And I think the only side note I want to add here is that, has anyone played Nier Automata? Is Nier Automata like this style of game? I feel like after I played through Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, I have seen like a handful of videos about Nier Automata, and that seems like something that's really, really good, and kind of in line with this action slashing gameplay. I don't know. If I should play Nier Automata, let me know in the comments. Is that game like super, super good, or should I skip it? The next game that I played was Metal Gear Solid PeaceWalker. And man, PeaceWalker is like the perfect introduction to the set of mechanics that they were going to introduce into Metal Gear Solid 5. And I'm just going to say this here because I think this is a good point to add it in. My kind of observation of the series is that it felt like Hideo Kojima was trying to make one kind of game with Metal Gear Solid 1 through 4. A linear stealth action adventure that really focused on giving you a bunch of tools that you can utilize in this very forward-pressing narrative experience. That's what Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, 3, and 4 feel like to me, and I think it ramps up in quality so that in Metal Gear Solid 1, you're getting the idea of what Kojima wants to present, and by 4, it feels like in a lot of ways he's mastered that concept, and he's giving you the most refined version of that idea that he can give you at the time, both from the narrative and gameplay mechanics. On the flip side, I think Peace Walker represents the start of the game that he was trying to make in Death Stranding 2. It feels to me like the mechanics that we see in Peace Walker. You have this sortie and you're going through your missions and you have these separate base building things that you can do and you're engaging with alternate systems. This seems like the introduction to a game concept that gets perfected in Death Stranding 2. And I feel like where Metal Gear Solid 1 is, the starting point for MGS 1 through 4, with Peace Walker, it starts there, and then he expands on these concepts and ideas in Metal Gear Solid 5. And then in Death Stranding 1, he comes back and tweaks all those things to fit this different skew where they're maybe more reliable or indicative of the experience that he's trying to tell. And then in Death Stranding 2, he really gets this culminating point of having found like the perfect end state for a lot of these concepts and mechanics. That is what it feels like to me. And that kind of maybe colors my opinion on Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker and Metal Gear Solid 5, because while I really, really enjoy Death Stranding 2. There are some components of the base building side of the Metal Gear games that I don't really feel like meshes super well for me. But with that being said, Peace Walker, I think, is the perfect iteration of this because of its size. The missions are very short and digestible. The way that you engage with your base seems a lot more simple, and so it's more satisfying to kind of not have to put as much time and effort into doing those things to get to an advanced state. And while it doesn't offer as much literal gameplay as Metal Gear Solid 5 does, I think that for me, it was more enjoyable on this scale than it is on a larger scale. It's not too lengthy, but overall it has a lot of replayability, and the final standoff of where we see the Pentagon Situation Room and we see Miller on the plane with Zadornov and the other dude, and we see Snake on the ground with Peace Walker, and there's this, interesting relationship where the boss AI is not the boss, but also it has like the ideas of the boss, and it's willing to sacrifice itself to prevent this kind of mutually assured destruction, which is what the boss did in Metal Gear Solid 3. It's like that idea is the perfect escalation from what we have seen narratively in the other Metal Gear Solid games, because the tension in that moment allows you to understand the impact of the events that are going on with Big Boss. Like, that's something that's really talked about in the abstract from people like The Boss or Eva or Miller, in different aspects of the game. But in the end of Peace Walker, you literally get to observe and experience all these different places and points in time where it actually is having an impact on the world. If you do not complete this mission, it will lead to devastation across the globe, and you're at this kind of focus point of that conflict. And that feeling does make you feel like Big Boss. You are the guy. This is the guy who's on the front line of the most covert operations, ensuring that the world moves on in the way that we all want it to. And I don't think anywhere else in the series is achieved better than here. And so the narrative was really, really strong for me up until that moment. I forget if it's chapter 5 or chapter 6 that comes after that, is so bad to me that it taints the whole experience. So, like I said, you have this culminating moment. You're doing all these mainline missions where you're following this really solid, straightforward progression about how, MSF, the boss's new organization that he's rolling with, is building up as this private military company, and how they're going to change the world. And Miller's there, and there's these other shady characters, and what is Paz up to, and what about Chico, and what about, the rebels that you're helping, and it's really good, really straightforward, great Metal Gear, great espionage stuff, great Cold War era. It's like, it's all perfect. And then in that final fucking chapter, the mainline missions that you play are hide and seek. Zadornov, who I will only refer to as the doorknob, because fuck that guy, he does not deserve even his real name being said. The doorknob plays hide and seek with you. So you go out and you do side missions until a mainline mission pops up, and the mainline mission is hide and seek, at which point you'll go through maps that you've already gone to, which is fine. It's a PSP game, like, it's smaller, whatever. I don't even care about that. I enjoy doing the missions with different SKUs in this game because they're very concise. But now you're going back through the maps you've already been to, and what you're trying to find is an adult man who is standing against a wall. Listen, like I said earlier, I have small children. Okay, I get that hide and seek, while it can be a fun and engaging game where your wits are going against another person who is attempting to disguise themselves amongst a familiar situation even, or a space, and ooh, where could they be? This can be interesting. I agree that hide and seek can be fun. Okay, I'm an adult, but I can admit that. All right, but when you play hide and seek against a small child, it is not fun. Okay, they are literally pressed against a wall. They are standing behind an object. You can always see them, okay? You entertain this for the child because it's fun for them. Oh, where is the boy? Where is the girl? Where could she be hiding? But you know where they are, okay? It is not fun when you are the greatest soldier on planet Earth and you are locating a KGB operative. Why is a KGB operative, when he sees and hears me coming, just pressing his belly against a flat wall in complete plain view? It doesn't make any sense. And while it is funny, and there's a lot of funny stuff that doesn't make sense in the entire Metal Gear Solid, franchise, It's also not engaging. It's like, it's not fun. He's not really hidden. You're gonna find him very easily, and it doesn't even make sense. And the conclusion, being the Peace Walker battle, is a lot of fun. I don't want to say the best fight in the whole series. It also suffers from that thing I was talking about with Rising Revengeance, where all of a sudden you have terminals and you're trying to lock on with cannons, and the Peace Walker is like moving in a way when they're on the same platform as you that I just did not see with any other Metal Gear battle or anything beforehand. So it's kind of like, oh, what is the dodge here? Not like super frustrating or the hardest fight ever, but it does have that other component of it. The music is incredible, though. We're getting like this Japanese like pop song, it sounds like, and all the music in Metal Gear is fantastic. But particularly here, I do think that it is utilized very well to create the sentiment of you're fighting what you believe to be is this teenage girl. That individual fight is fun. The stuff that happens after it, the narrative stuff before it, oh my god, horrible. Why the fuck am I even playing this? I really should have just finished after the credits rolled the first time. That's basically what I was left with there. Also, there's this really weird thing I just have to fucking say, because at a certain point I was doing a mission where we were at the beach with Paz, who once again is being portrayed. I get that she's not actually a teenager. I think she's actually an adult, and that's one of the things that we learn, is that she was this operative and she's working undercover against you or whatever. But when Snake thinks she's 16, they like go on a date and get into the love box together and bounce around for a little bit. I cannot for the life of me understand why this was put in the game. It's such a weird thing. It's so off-putting. I'm trying to like recognize that there probably is like a little bit of cultural difference here. There's something lost in translation. I'm trying to like understand that, but also I just can't really wrap my head around as to why that was included. Maybe it's just a fun side thing, or it was indicative of a trend that was in Japanese games at the time, or, you know, like dating sim type stuff. I don't know exactly. But playing through that was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Or, you know, zooming in on Paz in the beginning of the game, and then all of a sudden you're looking at a child in a bra and underwear, and you're like, all right, how do I fucking, L1, L1, how do I get the fuck out of here? That kind of thing. But that's a Kojima-ism. I'm willing to move past it. But yeah, Peace Walker, great game up until the last chapter. The Peace Walker fight is good, but honestly, that entire last chapter is so unfortunate. And I honestly don't even care about how that explains the lead into Ground Zeroes, because I personally feel like getting that presented to me via Ground Zeroes and learning about what happened to Paz and Chico after that was kind of a better way of getting that information for me personally. But yeah, great game, very digestible. One of the games that I would probably come back to in the future to fuck around in, because it is so easy to pounce into these missions, and they're not super long, and you can get like a pretty hefty experience out of it in a short amount of time. So great game. Horrible ending that almost taints the whole thing for me, especially from a narrative component. But I would say my favorite game that I played out of these last four. So in the back end of the series, Peace Walker is 1000% my number one. All right, on to Metal Gear Solid 5. And I think this is the point where I have to say something that I feel like is going to be pretty controversial. Metal Gear Solid 5 is the best video game in the franchise, probably, objectively, but the worst Metal Gear game. It is the worst Metal Gear game to me, and I just feel like everything that I had loved about the series leading up to this moment. And like I said, I had played through Metal Gear Solid 5 when it come out a long time ago, completely disconnected from the narrative, no idea what's going on, skipping cuts, just playing the game and enjoying it, all right? This is a great open world stealth game with base building mechanics and just extensive upgrade paths that give you a lot of gameplay if you want it there. The multiplayer stuff is cool. The FOB or base rating is really cool. Everything in this package from a gameplay perspective, I think, is the highest quality stuff that's been offered in the Metal Gear Solid franchise. And I just don't really like it. I'm not like a huge fan. I agree that it's enjoyable. I think it's a fun game to play. But the tone of everything is so disconnected from what I wanted out of it after going through these other games that it was difficult to even enjoy it. And I kind of felt like this entire time, being someone who's coming to the series from not a nostalgic perspective. I'm playing through all of them for the first time, that I wouldn't really give too much of a fuck that David Hayter was no longer Snake, and that, that Kiefer Sutherland was playing Venom Snake, and that Ocelot was Troy Barker, whatever his name is. I feel like I wouldn't really care about those things, but it was off-putting. It was off-putting after going through and actually seeing the relationship between Big Boss and Ocelot, and hearing their voice and interacting with them. It was really, really strange, which I think is something that's intentional. I think a lot of things about this game that are off-putting to me, having come from just playing through the rest of the series, was something that Kojima wanted to do. I think while it might be a little bit pretentious to suggest that the idea that the game is unfinished is because he wanted to make you feel phantom pain, I do think that he absolutely was trying to make you feel a phantom pain with a lot of decisions he made. And obviously the Kiefer Sutherland thing is the fact that, it's not really Big Boss, it's a body double, and that's like the big twist, which is that's a cool spy thriller twist to have in the game. And especially if you're coming through with the context of everything else. I see how you could have picked up on that earlier on with the folded picture, and you're seeing Volgin, and you're interacting with these people, and Snake isn't having the reactions or kind of conversations you think you would have given the history. So I get how that could be a great reveal, because it's something that you could have deduced earlier on, really from just the standpoint of a player who's played, the other games before. I don't think it was that hidden or deep in the entirety of the experience. But because it's so separated from the other games, it just makes it feel like a tense spy movie knockoff kind of thing. Maybe it's the fact that it was Kiefer Sutherland, but I really, throughout playing it, was brought back to the show 24, which is kind of like an old man show reference, I think, for me. This show had come out when I was a kid, and I remember, it's a 24-hour period, and Kiefer Sutherland's this agent. He's got to get rid of anthrax at the Pentagon or do whatever, and it's super tense because it's just 24 episodes, each an hour long. And the show's happening in real time, and every hour of this dude's life for the next day is going to be the most intense shit he's ever fucking dealt with. It kind of felt like that. Is like everything was very dramatic and really over the top and so super serious. And I get that another component of that surely is the fact that Kojima wanted to explain how we got to the fucking evil dude in Metal Gear 1 and 2. Like, how did that guy go from he'll save every one of us, in PeaceWalker, he's saving the world, and Metal Gear Solid 3, he's like doing his best to try to figure out this crazy world of espionage and try to be the good guy, to now he's like pure evil. And I think he does a good job. Like, by the end, when you play the truth mission and you see Venom Snake turn and walk away, you get the fact that he's kind of been through so much trauma, and his journey has been so difficult that you understand how he's coming to the conclusion about violence that he is. You get why he's kind of turned into this absolute nemesis kind of guy. He really is evil. Like, I get that. And it's displayed in the horn growing and the devil tail you have. And it's like, all that is fantastic. In the sense that I get what you're trying to do. But in the sense that it's a Metal Gear game, it's just so disconnected to me. It's like, where is the fun? Where is the humor? Where's the ambiance? Where's the like tech that we're engaging with and questioning and learning about? It's like, it just feels like such a different experience, because it is a different experience, and it's not actually Naked Snake. But I don't know. I also get that this kind of like connects things full circle in a way. There's still a lot of questions that I feel like don't make super sense to me. I'm not fully understanding how Frank Yeager and the boss connect. I get that there's an answer there. I'm not fully understanding, like, obviously the horn maybe is a retcon. Like, there's stuff like this where, like, I get that Metal Gear doesn't line up one-to-one. It's not a perfect puzzle piece, like maybe I talked about earlier, said that. But I do like also feel like, despite all those things, it wasn't super satisfying. And worst of all, this game like suffers from the same exact thing that Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker did, which is, after playing Peace Walker, the one thing that I would hope they would have learned with these systems would be that you can't have the last chapter just be the worst thing ever and so unsatisfying because it'll leave a sour taste in your mouth about the whole story experience. This game really feels like, despite not getting a bunch of answers to stuff after that first chapter, is it the first chapter that ends with the Skullface Sahelanthropus fight? I feel like the game should have ended there. I get it. Like, hey, playing through that second chapter, you're really just replaying missions, though, and that's a whole other thing. I get that there's like 5 minutes maybe of information or 10 minutes of information that is like, whoa, huge, like quiet, was infected with a Vocor parasite. And then she released it to save the boss's life in the desert. And that's why their connection is so deep. And like, I can imagine there's that fan animation of when Venom Snake gets killed in Metal Gear 1 and Quiet comes to greet him, take him to whatever, the gates of hell, probably where he's fucking going. I get that. Seeing Eli kind of in his relationship with Venom Snake and believing that that's Big Boss maybe or whatever. I don't know exactly if that's the conclusion that Eli had come to. Liquid brother, but I get that those are all very relevant and key moments. I just feel like, man, you should have just thrown that in there with the first chapter, end with the Skullface conclusion, call it a day. It's a short experience. Let the rest of the game, hey, you keep playing, you keep building your base. Maybe give the truth thing like as a secret ending that you can find in the end of the game if you didn't put it together with all the clues that you found in the first part. But the idea that you're going through these other missions, just playing random stuff and replaying old missions to unlock these, handful of story moment missions, which aren't like super great on their own anyways, and all seem to happen like in places that we've largely already been to, aside from, I guess, the quarantine zone on Mother Base. I mean, that's like a great visual mission when you're playing as Venom and you're going through and you see all the infected people and you got to kill your own people, and then you see him, with the ashes and he rubbing on his face. I get that that's great character development for explaining why Venom chooses to run his version of Outer Heaven the way that he does, and describing that path. But just so disconnected and so unsatisfying to experience from a gameplay perspective that it taints the whole thing for me. Like, I just wish it would have been worked in to something that was more concise, I think, in the totality of the project. The caveat to that, I will say, is that I think from a gameplay perspective, the subsistence missions are probably the best in the whole game. I really loved being dropped in with nothing and going through the bases and building up your kit and trying to accomplish whatever goal you have. That was a ton of fun. I almost wish they would have introduced that idea in other parts of the game so we could have gotten to experience that in a way that narratively makes sense. But unfortunately for me, I just think the totality of being this open world base builder and gathering resources and that being kind of like the end gameplay loop, and the unsatisfying nature of the second act of the game, and the fact that Eli leaves and there was supposed to be a whole other piece of content and missions where you go to the island where they are and you see how Eli gets the vocal cord parasite or whatever taken out of him, maybe by Psycho Mantis, and that's how they're controlling Sahelanthropus on the island, and their relationship, for like all of that stuff just being absent from it that makes the second chapter even worse, because it's not a bridge to anything that was building up to something bigger or different or more engaging. Once again, I do think the pretentious thing of saying like Hideo Kojima did his job, he made me feel a phantom pain or whatever, is fine and dandy. I get that a little bit, but ultimately, just for the type of gameplay experiences I like, despite this being mechanically the best stealth that's on display in any of the games, I can't say that's my favorite. I would say that it's my least favorite Metal Gear game, actually. I would recommend it to, if you don't like Metal Gear, you should play Metal Gear Solid 5. If all the other Metal Gear Solid games put you off, you should go play Metal Gear Solid 5 and at least understand why stealth action can be so fun. The last thing I'll say is that after playing through the Metal Gear games on stream, very satisfying, I did get to play some Splinter Cell. I played the first Splinter Cell, and I played Chaos Theory, which they were provided to me by Ubisoft before the release of their upcoming Netflix show about Splinter Cell, which I watched the first episode of, and it's fairly good. I think some good action anime starts with a thigh choke, which you always love to see. But one of my really big takeaways and why I wanted to jump in and play a little bit of another stealth action game, just to be kind of reminded, because I have played a lot of the Splinter Cell games a long time ago when they had originally released. I just wanted to see like how do the mechanics carry over, and my big takeaway after getting that experience is, man, Metal Gear was the first and the best. I mean, I don't really know if there's another experience that even reaches the same level of any of the Metal Gear games in their given format in terms of offering a enjoyable, bug-free stealth game with an interesting story. And despite like kind of the charm that Splinter Cell has, after playing through the Metal Gear games, I don't know that I'm ever going to be able to dump a lot of time into a Splinter Cell game just because the mechanics, I don't know, everything just feels clunky and a little bit off to me, and like an American imitation of something that was created by tools that maybe we just don't have access to over here or something. Or maybe it's just Kojima's mind, and if I'm, sneaking around corridors and shooting lights out and stuff, I need to be fighting a guy named Fat Man or something. I don't know. Maybe that's just a me thing. I did also, after finishing the games, go back and I replayed through the Tanker mission, and I think that's what really the Tinker mission in Metal Gear Solid 2, the intro where you're playing as Snake, which is a little bit shorter. And man, that really solidified for me my conclusion on Metal Gear Solid 5, because from my perspective, I think the list goes this. I think it's Metal Gear Solid 3, then Metal Gear Solid 2, then 1 or 4. I think 1 and 4 kind of occupy the 3 position for me together. Then Peace Walker, then Rising, then 5. I think that's my list. That's my definitive Metal Gear Solid list, at least as of right now. And when I went back through and I played that Taker mission, I just think that that highlights all of the charm and quality that comes with a much more directed experience. Not just from like the story, which obviously Metal Gear Solid 2 story is like just, I don't know, I don't want to say perfect, but incredible for what it was able to achieve and how it presented it. And to see kind of how they diverted away a lot from the directness of the experience to opt for gameplay systems that were more in line with what technology advanced and allowed them to do, just kind of made me feel like, man, I wish we had more experiences that are akin to what I feel like Kojima was going for in 1 through 3 and kind of culminating in Metal Gear Solid 4. But Metal Gear Solid, great games, great franchise. I've yapped for a ridiculous amount of time now about these games. Thank you once again to Michael, who recommended me play the series. I absolutely enjoyed it. Yeah, and I guess on to the next. I'll see you guys later. Please let me know your thoughts about Metal Gear in the comments below, and have a good day. All right, bye.